They say every house has a soul, but some have something darker. In a quiet town in New York, a beautiful home became a nightmare that never ended. Behind its peaceful walls, whispers grew louder, shadows moved, and blood was spilled. What happened inside still haunts those who dare to speak about it. The neighbors call it cursed. The world calls it the Amityville Horror. They say every house has a soul, but some have something darker. In a quiet town in New York, a beautiful home became a nightmare that never ended. Behind its peaceful walls, whispers grew louder, shadows moved, and blood was spilled. What happened inside still haunts those who dare to speak about it. The neighbors call it cursed. The world calls it the Amityville Horror. There are houses that feel alive, not because of their beauty, but because something inside them refuses to die. At first glance, 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville looks perfect. A white colonial house, a small front yard, and the kind of peaceful street families dream about. But in November of 1974, that peace was shattered forever. Inside that house lived the DeFeo family, Ronald and Louise and their 5 children. They were well known in the community, quiet and ordinary. But on the night of November 13th, something unimaginable happened. Their eldest son, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., took a rifle and went room to room, shooting every member of his family while they slept. The sound of gunfire should have echoed through the neighborhood, but no one heard a thing. When police entered, every victim was lying face down in bed, as if carefully placed. No signs of struggle, no screams, no movement, only silence and death. When questioned, Butch said something terrifying. He claimed voices inside the house told him to kill. They whispered, he said, and once he started, he couldn't stop. He told police it was like someone else was pulling the trigger. People called him insane, but others wondered if there was something in that house, something that wanted blood. For a year, the house stood empty. No one wanted to live there. But in December 1975, a young couple, George and Kathy Lutz, bought it for a shockingly low price. They knew what had happened inside, but they believed love could erase the past. They moved in with Kathy's 3 children, full of hope. That hope didn't last long. From the first night, they felt it. The air was heavy. Freezing cold patches appeared in random spots. Doors opened and closed by themselves, and the dog refused to go near the basement. Kathy said it felt like someone was always watching them. The family invited their priest, Father Mancuso, to bless the house. As he began the blessing in one of the bedrooms, he heard a deep, growling voice whisper just one phrase: "Get out." The priest fled, sick and shaken. Soon after, he broke out in blisters on his hands, as if burned. He warned the Lutz family to stay away from that room. The days that followed were worse. A thick green slime began to ooze from keyholes and door frames. Doors would slam in the middle of the night. George woke up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same time the DeFeo murders had occurred. Sweating, hearing footsteps in the hall and whispers calling his name, he became obsessed with the fireplace, chopping wood endlessly and staring into the flames for hours. His personality began to change, distant, angry, consumed by something invisible. Kathy had horrifying nightmares. She saw the DeFeo children lying dead in their beds. She woke up covered in bruises, claiming invisible hands held her down during the night. One evening, she looked in the mirror and saw herself as an old, decayed woman, the children spoke of a new friend named Jody, a massive pig-like creature with glowing red eyes that appeared outside their windows. Kathy once saw those eyes herself, two red orbs glowing from the dark. George ran outside, but there were no footprints in the snow, none except his own. Inside the house, crucifixes turned upside down. The smell of decay spread and disappeared just as quickly. And one day, hundreds of flies appeared in a single room in the middle of winter. The same room where the priest had heard the voice. They covered the walls and ceiling, buzzing so loud it felt alive. When George swatted them, they vanished instantly. As days passed, George and Kathy realized they were trapped. The house didn't want them to leave, and it didn't want them to stay. It fed on them, on their fear, on their energy. George began hearing music playing from nowhere. The front door would unlock itself. The youngest child said a shadowy figure stood by his bed every night, whispering, "I will never let you go." On the 28th night, everything reached its breaking point. George woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, hearing voices from the basement calling his name. Kathy said the beds were shaking, and a black mist filled the hallway. They grabbed their children and ran, leaving everything behind: clothes, food, furniture. They never returned. Days later, a team of paranormal investigators arrived, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, the same couple who would later become famous for The Conjuring. The moment they entered, Lorraine said she felt a demonic presence so strong, it nearly overwhelmed her. During their investigation, a motion-activated camera snapped a photo of what looked like a young boy peeking from a doorway, his eyes glowing faintly, his face identical to one of the murdered DeFeo children. The Warrens left convinced the house was possessed by something inhuman, but skeptics called it a hoax, claiming the Lutzes made it all up to sell their story. Still, no one could explain the strange physical effects visitors reported: headaches, nausea, sudden drops in temperature, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Some locals said the house was built over cursed Native American burial grounds. Others believed the murders had opened a doorway, a gateway to something dark that refused to close. Years passed. The house was remodeled. Its famous eye windows changed. Families moved in and out, some claiming peace, others fleeing in weeks. To this day, the house still stands. Tourists drive by just to see it, but locals avoid it after dark. They say if you stand on the sidewalk at midnight, you can feel it watching you. The house itself breathing, alive, waiting. The Amityville Horror became a legend. Books, films, documentaries. But beneath the stories lies one terrifying truth. Something happened there. Something no one has ever fully explained. And maybe it's not just a story of ghosts, but of energy, pain, hatred, and death that never truly fade. Some evil doesn't die. It lingers. It waits for a new family, a new name, a new chapter to begin. So next time you see a beautiful old house on a quiet street with its lights off and curtains drawn, remember Amityville. Remember that evil doesn't always live in monsters or demons. Sometimes it lives in walls. The screen fades to black. The sound of slow breathing echoes, followed by one whisper in the dark. Get out. They say grief can drive the human mind into places it was never meant to go. But what if grief doesn't just destroy? What if it builds? This is the story of a woman who tried to escape her own curse by building a house so strange, so impossible, that even the dead would get lost inside it. Her name was Sarah Winchester, and this is the mansion she created for her ghosts. Sarah Winchester was born into wealth, married to William Ward Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the company that built the rifle that conquered the American frontier, the gun that protected families, ended wars, and spilled the blood of thousands. Each trigger pulled made her family richer and left another ghost behind. In 1881, tragedy struck. Sarah's beloved husband, William, died of tuberculosis. Only a short time before that, she had already lost her infant daughter. 2 deaths, one after another, tore her world apart. Alone and drowning in sorrow, Sarah sought answers in the supernatural. She turned to a spiritual medium, desperate for a reason to keep living. What the medium told her changed everything. "You are cursed," the medium said. "The spirits of those killed by your husband's invention surround you. They will never rest, unless you build a home for them, a house for the dead. But you must never stop building. The day you stop, you will die." And Sarah believed it. She left her home in New Haven, Connecticut, and traveled west until she found a quiet stretch of land in San Jose, California. There she bought an unfinished farmhouse. That was the beginning. From that moment, construction never stopped. Not for one day, not for one night. For the next 38 years, carpenters worked in shifts around the clock. There was no blueprint, no plan, no end. Sarah would wake in the middle of the night and summon her foreman, giving him new instructions she claimed had been whispered to her by the spirits themselves. "A staircase here," she would say. "A door there." Sometimes she ordered entire rooms sealed off or stairways rebuilt at odd angles. No one questioned her. She paid her workers double the usual wage, in gold. Slowly, the farmhouse grew into a sprawling, impossible mansion. Corridors twisted into dead ends. Doors opened into brick walls. Some doorways led to sheer drops into the garden below. There were stairs that rose straight into the ceiling, windows built into floors, hidden rooms, secret hallways. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, expanding, changing shape to protect its creator. Sarah was convinced that as long as she kept it building, the ghosts would remain trapped inside the maze. She believed the confusing architecture would disorient them, that they would never find her if the house kept changing. Every night at midnight, she held seances in a small hidden chamber at the center of the mansion. It was known as the seance room. No one was ever allowed to enter it but her. She would sit there alone, surrounded by candles, holding her husband's old rifle, and ask the spirits what she should build next. Sometimes, workers said they could hear her talking to someone late into the night. Other times, they heard the sound of footsteps pacing the corridors when no one else was awake. She lived this way for decades, a prisoner of her own guilt. She never stopped mourning her husband or her daughter. She wore only black, kept her face veiled in public, and avoided the outside world entirely. Her neighbors whispered that she was insane. Others said she was haunted, not by ghosts, but by the weight of all the lives taken by the Winchester rifle. Then came the earthquake of 1906. It was early morning when the ground began to shake. The mansion groaned, walls cracked, chimneys collapsed. Entire sections of the house were destroyed. Sarah was trapped for several hours in one of her rooms before being rescued. When she emerged, she was pale, trembling, convinced the spirits had punished her. After that day, She sealed off the entire front section of the mansion, more than 30 rooms, and never entered them again. She said they belonged to the angry ones. But even after the earthquake, the building continued. The sound of hammers echoed through the night. Visitors said the house never slept. Some workers refused to return after hearing voices whispering their names or seeing tools move on their own. Others stayed, lured by her generosity and by the mystery. When Sarah Winchester finally died in 1922, at the age of 83, construction stopped immediately. The hammers fell silent for the first time in nearly 4 decades. She left behind a house that made no sense, a labyrinth of madness with over 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, and staircases that led nowhere. When investigators entered after her death, they found secret passageways, spy holes built into walls, and rooms within rooms. It was impossible to create a full map of the place. No one could tell where it began or where it ended. The mansion felt like a living thing, as if it had grown from her mind, twisting itself around her fears and her grief. Today, the Winchester Mystery House still stands, open to visitors. Tourists walk through its endless corridors, laughing nervously, until they realize that they've lost track of where they came from. Some say they feel watched. Others claim to see a faint figure of a woman in black drifting through the halls. Guides have reported hearing distant piano music, even when no one is near the music room. Security cameras capture doors swinging open in empty rooms and lights turning on by themselves. They say Sarah still walks the corridors every night at midnight, the time she used to call her spirits. Some claim they've heard the faint ringing of the bell she once used to summon and dismiss them. It rings twice, once to call the dead, once to send them away. But sometimes it only rings once. The house remains a monument to guilt, fear, and the strange relationship between the living and the dead. It's a place where time doesn't move forward. It just circles endlessly, like the stairs that lead to nowhere. And maybe that's exactly what Sarah wanted, to keep building forever, trapped in her own creation, hiding from the ghosts that never forgave her. Because sometimes the real haunting isn't done by the dead. It's done by the living who can't let go. The sound of distant hammering fades slowly. A single door creaks open, then slams shut as the whisper of a woman's voice echoes through the dark. Keep building. At first, it looked like an ordinary little home on a quiet street. A small white house with a picket fence, trees swaying softly in the Kansas wind. But behind its peaceful appearance, something waited, something that pretended to be innocent, the kind of evil that hides behind the face of a child. This is the story of the Sallie House, a place so haunted that even trained investigators refused to return. It all began in the early 1900s in Atchison, Kansas. The house was owned by a local physician. One day, a frantic mother arrived at his door carrying her 6-year-old daughter, Sallie, who was suffering from severe stomach pain. The doctor quickly diagnosed appendicitis and rushed to perform emergency surgery. But in his haste, he made a fatal mistake. He began the procedure before the anesthesia took full effect. Sallie woke up on the table, screaming, her small hands grabbing for the doctor as he tried to finish. Moments later, she died in agony. The mother's screams echoed through the house. The doctor never recovered from what he had done. He sold the home shortly after, but those who moved in said the girl never left. For decades, locals whispered about the Sallie House. People said lights flickered when children walked by. Pets refused to enter the front door. Some nights passers-by claimed to see the shape of a little girl standing in the upstairs window, watching silently. But the real nightmare began nearly a century later, in 1993, when a young couple named Tony and Deborah Pickman moved into the house. At first, it seemed like any other old home. They painted the walls, unpacked boxes, and settled in. But soon, small things began to happen. The baby monitor would crackle with strange noises, whispers, faint giggles, the sound of footsteps pacing the nursery. Lights flickered even after the wiring was replaced. One night, Deborah walked into the kitchen and found all the chairs pulled away from the table. Another night, Tony woke to the feeling of small hands touching his face. When he turned on the light, no one was there, but 3 small scratches ran down his cheek. They tried to rationalize it. Maybe stress, maybe electrical problems. Until one day, Tony saw her. A little girl standing at the foot of the stairs, her hair in curls, wearing a light blue dress. She looked lost. He blinked, and she was gone. At first, the couple believed the spirit was harmless, maybe even playful. They called her Sallie. Toys would move across the floor, and Deborah began leaving candy out for her, believing it might calm her spirit. But the activity grew darker. The temperature in the nursery dropped to freezing. The baby cried at night as if terrified by something unseen. Tony began to wake up with deep scratches across his chest and arms. Always 3, always bleeding. Objects started flying across rooms. One morning, Deborah found a burnt teddy bear in the middle of the living room. Another night, a framed picture was ripped from the wall and thrown to the floor with such force that the glass shattered. Tony claimed to see a shadowy figure of a woman standing over him in bed. Not the child they thought was haunting them, but something older, something hateful. They contacted a team of paranormal investigators. Cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic sensors were placed throughout the house. Almost immediately, strange readings began to appear. One investigator felt a burning sensation on his arm, and when he rolled up his sleeve, there were 3 long scratches, identical to Tony's. Another heard a child's voice whisper, "Do you want to play?" In the basement, a camera captured what looked like a faint mist forming into the shape of a small girl, then vanishing as quickly as it appeared. But when the investigators reviewed their recordings later that night, they found something else. A low, guttural voice beneath the sound of Sallie's giggles, like 2 entities speaking at once. One innocent, one pure malice. The team concluded that Sallie might not be the only spirit in the house. Some believed the child was being used, manipulated, by a darker, demonic force pretending to be her. The scratches, the violence, the fear, all signs of something feeding on the family's energy. Tony and Deborah's marriage began to fall apart. He became angry, paranoid, and withdrawn. Deborah said the house made him different, colder, distant, like someone else was living inside him. Eventually, they fled in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. Since then, the Sallie House has become one of America's most infamous haunted locations. Paranormal researchers, television crews, and skeptics have all tried to explain the events, but none could. Electronic devices fail inside. Batteries drain instantly. People feel nauseous, dizzy, or violently ill after just a few minutes in certain rooms. The most common occurrence, the scratches, continues to this day. Always 3 marks, always sudden, always burning. Visitors report the sound of a child laughing behind them when no one is there. Some hear faint crying from the upstairs nursery. Others see toys move by themselves or smell burning fabric with no fire in sight. A few have even captured the voice of a little girl on tape saying, "I'm sorry," but perhaps the most disturbing claim came from a former owner who lived there briefly in the 2000s. He said that every night, just before 3 a.m., he'd wake up and see a small figure standing in the doorway. A little girl, motionless, with empty eyes. If he closed his eyes and opened them again, she'd be gone. But her voice would remain in his head, whispering over and over, "Don't leave me. Today, the Sallie House is still standing, empty most of the time, but never truly silent." Locals say lights flicker inside even when no one is home. Paranormal groups who dare to enter describe the same thing. An overwhelming sadness at first, then anger, and finally the unmistakable feeling that something wants you to leave, but won't let you go. They call it the House of the Little Girl, but those who've been inside say the truth is much darker. The spirit that lives there isn't a child anymore, if it ever was. It's something else now. Something that wears a child's face to make you trusted. Something that waits quietly in the dark, whispering, laughing, watching, until you realize it's standing right behind you. The sound of faint giggling fades into static. Then, in the silence, a child's voice whispers softly, "Do you want to play?"